Yo, what is up, y'all? Anime Autistic here with a quick intro. Let's talk about Rick and Morty. So, not all of my videos are going to be about anime, but there'll be the majority of them. But I have to talk about Rick and Morty because, one, it's a phenomenal show. It's so good. And two, when I first watched it, I just kind of was like, yo, this is a very funny, science fiction adventure kind of show that's going on there. And that is what it is. It is a sci-fi comedy. And it's animated, everything like that. It really lends itself to really explore some space, some things, do a whole lot with it. There's some shows that are out there that I think would benefit from being animated. Rick and Morty just went for it. They went for the idea. But I watched the show a second time, and I noticed that it's not necessarily a show about sci-fi, and it's not necessarily an adventure show. What it really is a show that's exploring the human condition. So I wanted to talk about that aspect of Rick and Morty. How it is holding a light to how we live. And it asks a lot of important and interesting questions. One of the major questions of the show is asking, what does family mean? Why is it important? How is it important? Those kind of things. Because we see Rick Sanchez, while he admits to himself and it's knowledge to him, and he has no problem with this being a fact, that he has an infinite amount of family over infinite amount of dimensions. Yet he keeps that bond with his daughter Beth. He cared despite which Beth it is, or which interpretation it's supposed to be. To him, he still has that bond to Beth and to Morty and to Summer. Not Jerry. Screw Jerry. Jerry sucks. But he still has that. He still has that bond with her. So as much posturing as we can pretend that our family means nothing, everything like that, we can be like, I don't know, I've got a strenuous family relationship. Me and my whoever don't really get along. We can say that all we want, but the fact of the matter is, it's something that does tie us, it bonds us genetically, being similar to us, and we want to protect those who share that genetic code with us. It's strictly biological in some aspect, but also it is an important thing, and you shouldn't ever take those people in your life for granted, because they really are. They ought to be important people to you. That's just kind of the deal. But it really does explore that in some interesting ways, and it not just family as in biologically, but the idea of the family unit. How does it function? How does it work? It's really interestingly explored, and just in that aspect, and that's just a small. It's not a tiny itty bitty aspect of the show, but it's one of the things that's conversed upon and thought upon. How does this family unit work? Who's responsible for what? Who needs to be in charge of what? It's just that, and there's thin lines of what goes on, but ultimately what it is who do you want to protect? I guess is what it's supposed to be. And what are you protecting by protecting that person? Another wonderful, and I do mean this, wonderful concept that's kind of toyed with in the show is honesty. And is it a good policy? Is it something that should sometimes be shrouded? If we're deceitful, dishonest people, do we many times, deceive ourselves, make ourselves believe things that we don't truly believe inside? And it's really explored that part big time, because Rick is this deceitful liar. He's a straight up liar. He's always has an agenda. There's always something that he's trying to get out of a situation. He'll kind of do anything to get whatever he wants. He has no problem with that. His moral compass is all been out of shape. Does not point in the right direction whatsoever. We see him. He says all these things. He probably means a whole lot of them. Like, there's In the first episode, I loved this. And this was him being honest. You know, at the very first episode, he's like, school's not a place for smart people, Jerry. Because he was bringing Morty out of school and they were worried Morty was going to flunk. Which, I mean, he probably would anyway. Morty's not a smart kid. But just like him saying that, I believe that he means that. Because that's kind of a little truth bomb. Because a lot of times school doesn't work. It's got a whole bunch of issues. We don't learn a lot of things that we're supposed to in K through 12 that really are important things to our life. Like how banking works, loans, etc. Plan, budgeting, all, just basic stuff you need to do as an adult, let alone a bunch of other stuff that's really important, like how to invest, just general kind of society ideas. Like, I think sociology really should be more of a, it really should be a high school class that everyone's required to take, is so you can understand how sociology works and how we as a society work. Because it is an important idea. But going back to the honesty thing, it's not ever really super blatantly mentioned, but the ways we deceive ourselves are never super blatant. We always hide like little truths away from ourselves. We'll morph and we'll distort what we really see, to be what we actually want to see. Because we don't want to come to that truth. We don't want to come to that realization of what's really going on. Because sometimes we feel it's detrimental to ourselves and rather work through that. We just want to avoid it, forget about it, put it in the back seat. Say, hey, who really cares when we should care? And that kind of ties into another big theme of it, which is self-preservation. Rick will do all these things to, keep something that he wants and to get something that he wants, and he just did not want to let go. And it's part of a sense of pride thing. His pride cannot afford to get damaged, so he wants to keep it intact. And through that, he's just a destructive person, up to the point where he's self-destructive, and he doesn't he wants to have control of the situation, but he demands too much. He wants too much. His desires outweigh, the cost of really anything. It's kind of like Thanos almost in that way, where it's like, what did it cost? Everything. And he has no problem risking everything for things, just because he can't let things go. Because he himself feels like he cannot be wounded. I think it's the end of season 3. I think it's the last episode is the one with the president, where the general goes and he turns to him and he's like, he's not an effing god, sir. And Rick's like, you don't know what I am, and you don't know what I can do. That's a great line from Rick, because he's deceived himself, and he doesn't know it. There's also different points. I can't remember what it is. There's multiple points where he says, if there is a god, I'm the closest thing to it. Like, that's a line, and I don't remember what it's from, and I don't fully remember the context. God, I love this show. It's so good. First viewing, you might not see all these things, but eventually you totally get it. But he wants to preserve things, and he wants to try to keep everything as he sees fit. He refuses to admit he's wrong. And when we refuse to admit any of our wrongdoings or any ways that we fall short, we're not willing to grow. We believe that we're at that pinnacle, that peak. And is that really the healthy thing to do? Absolutely not. I think we all know that. Another big thing that's touched upon, but I might talk about this when I talk about, I'll probably talk about this in general, is how some shows handle depression. And I think Rick and Morty deals with loneliness and depression, where Rick has really kind of separated himself from everyone else because he believes he's so much higher up, like I was saying, than everybody else, that he puts himself on that pinnacle and refuses to look down. And they do say it's lonely on top, but that's not always exactly what they mean. You don't always have to refuse other people, or other things. You don't have to, deny yourself any sort of happiness in that situation. But I will probably touch on this on another video, so I'm not going to go too deep into it in this one right here. Another great thing that's exemplified through Rick and Morty's relationship is this idea of loyalty. What does it mean? What is it really worth? And I will personally say loyalty is worth a whole hell of a lot. Like, it's so important to have loyalty. And it's something that's so earned. It's not something that's like you just get, is loyalty. You know, because I don't just give people loyalty. I don't think too many people do. Those people that do, you know, they usually get taken advantage of. And that's kind of the case with Morty. But it's also something that's so hammered into Morty by Rick, of him, you know, in the very first episode, the end of the first episode, he's just like, Rick and Morty forever. You need me, Morty. You need me. And like, it's so hammered in to Morty how much he, you know, by Rick, how much Rick is needed in Morty's life. Where, you know, he's kind of trapped in that situation. He can't get out of it. And that's kind of the situation with a lot of people with their loyalty. Then there's things, and you know what? Here's a great thing to compare it to, is if you are familiar with Berserk, Guts' loyalty to Griffith was based off of admiration, respect, and based off of just kind of the strength of Griffith's will. But once he felt like he had almost outshined Griffith, the loyalty didn't necessarily crumble, but he knew that he didn't owe anything to Griffith, and he had kind of gotten everything that he wanted. But he was still loyal to Griffith up to that point, and still loyal afterwards, if you know what happens. Up to a certain point, he's loyal to Griffith. Morty's loyalty to Rick does not stem from that. Morty enjoys these adventures to a certain level, but there's so much that he doesn't. Like, there's that Morty's Mind Blowers episode where it's all the things would, you know, just kind of really messed with Morty's psyche, would have changed his worldview almost. So many of them did that, like, for real, which is crazy. And I love that so much. It's such a good... that episode's amazing, because it reveals that Rick really is evil, and he really just wants Morty to view him as, like, this god, almost. And the things that do slip through, you know, are unavoidable. So it kind of just brings down Rick, and also brings down Morty too, of like, everything's going, like, there's things that embarrass Rick that he just erases from Morty's memory, which goes back to that self-preservation thing of like, he needs to have that, he can't have his poor pride injured at all, which is one of those things that, you know, I mean, I'm making anime videos on YouTube, so obviously I have no pride. I'm you know, but really, like, that level of pride, that ego, no, it's something you can discard. You really don't need. You need to know your worth, and you need to fight for your worth, but it's not to that level. But yeah, anyway, I think it's an interesting dynamic that's between Rick and Morty, and just this sense of what is loyalty, what is it, and it's really something that you should view kind of episode to episode. Then there's a whole question of like, you know, does society owe you anything? Do you owe society anything? Is that a role that we play? And obviously we live in society, so we do owe it something. The question is, how much do you give? Is kind of like the answer for that. And the show kind of presents it as an idea of, you have to put yourself, you have to be the best you can be, and hope that others will follow. Which I like. That's how the show really does kind of express it. That's kind of what I got from most of the episodes, is like, how, you know, who, you know, what is the best thing to do in this situation? Where they just let humanity crumble. That one's so tough to come to grips with what's happening in the show, because it doesn't show it as a pretty thing. But society isn't necessarily a pretty thing, and really it is a construct. You can always change your perception of society, is the thing, but that doesn't make it any less actually what it is. There's also that question of, what does society owe me? And that answer is kind of nothing. Like, society doesn't really owe you anything. Your environment kind of shapes you, so it's harsh. It's just like nature, or just like a law of physics. Is like, things will happen, but that doesn't mean you're deserved anything. Like, nothing's deserved. through physics or anything like that. It's just something that happens because of something else. And I think we need to learn how to do with that. But you should always strive to be the best of yourself. It's so much of the show is Rick coming to terms episode to episode in ways that he's kind of falling short, even though, like I've said, he refuses to admit it. A lot of it is him struggling with different demons inside of him of why he's not, why he's not so great, or what's really wrong with him. And he has so much problem with that because I guess pretty much up to the point where he started living with his family, like he wasn't really feeling like he wasn't really holding a mirror to himself on who am I, what kind of person am I. So he now has to start to come to terms with the fact that he's a monster. There is a change a little bit in his conscience, a little bit as the show goes on, but it's not a huge change in his conscience. It's very minor. I don't know how the show is going to go, how it progresses. I know we're in season 4, and there's some things that it seems like things are rubbing off on Rick. There's this one dude that he does not kill, even though you think he's gonna, but he just does not. And when he dies, this dude who was pooping on Rick's toilet, and that's what incurred the rage of Rick. It's such a minor thing, yet he thinks he needs to, and he does all these things to torment this guy. But eventually he comes to kind of respect the guy and know what the guy's about. And it starts to rub off on him. So I'm interested in this idea of seeing Rick make these changes because he's coming to terms with who he is. All of kind of Beth's kind of storyline, basically her character arc, is dealing with the abandonment issues that she got from her father. And abandonment is one of those things that kind of can shape a person. I personally wouldn't be the best person to talk about this because I've never really super felt abandoned. I felt a lot of these other things. I think a lot of us struggle with. Abandonment's not one of those things that I know too much about, but I love that it's a huge part. Definitely in the first season, it's a massive part of the first season is the abandonment issues that Beth has with Rick. Another thing that the show touches upon, which is a great thing to touch upon, is this idea, and I don't feel like it's an idea, I feel like it's a fact, that intelligence isn't a positive thing or really a negative thing either. It's just a character trait. Someone's smart, that's just something about them. That's like the same thing as being tall or left-handed. It's just a character trait about the person. You can do all sorts of different things with your intelligence, with your talents, with your skills. If you're charismatic, you can be charismatic for good. You can be charismatic for evil. You can be smart for good, smart for evil. I do think it is kind of true that those who are very intelligent, especially hyper intelligent, have trouble really gripping on to other people. They do kind of gravitate to either being kind of lonesome or being loners, or just being around other people that they feel, oh, this person is kind of on my level. Is how they just, that's kind of just behavior of an intelligent person. There's all sorts of stuff like that. That's always interesting to me. This is not me bragging or anything. I have a pretty high IQ, and I always think about stuff like that. But it is kind of true because I am a loner too. And I'm not saying, I'm this big brain super genius. I'm not. I don't understand everything about this show. You have to have an IQ of 462 to fully understand Rick and Morty, and my IQ isn't even in the 300s. So, I don't really get the show fully. These are just things that I'm noticing from this fantastic show. It's one of my favorite. arguably probably my second favorite adult animation show behind BoJack Horseman, which is also amazing. Now, here's probably the biggest thing that I'm really going to talk about for the rest of this video is this idea of there's this dichotomy of power that's exemplified episode to episode to episode. It's not every single episode, but there seems to be almost always a confrontation of power. Who is in charge? Who is fighting against that charge? Who has the upper hand? Who's the person that has control of the situation? And a lot of times it's Rick. It's this idea of control and being able to rule the others, yourself, a situation, be able to take control, all these different things. It's shown when it's in Pluto, like that episode where Jerry goes to Pluto and he says Pluto's a planet. There's that episode in season 1 with the dogs, where the dogs, learn sentience, get control. It's shown in that episode where Morty has the kid, where there's the females and the males, and they're separated there between one another on that one weird planet. There's the one with the giant heads that demand the music. The president's involved. It's so many. The beginning of, I believe it's season 3, where the Galactic Empire, or whatever you want to call them, take over. Like all of those episodes, and even more, so many more. The one with Lil Rick. It's Lil Rick. That episode, like, so many of them are just about this dichotomy of power, how it works, and it's an interesting concept, and you see it through the show of, power, is it good, negative? Really, the search for power is kind of always going to lead you down a road of destruction, and it's kind of nuanced, kind of not nuanced, and all these different places, and really it's explored an interesting way of just who has the power. Are they really the winner, or are they just fooling themselves? This dichotomy of power ties back to kind of everything else as well, of fighting with yourself. Is it so important to you? This idea of loneliness as well. What does it cost? This idea of self-preservation, self-destruction. You want to be on top, you want to be the best in the world, but it's not, it's going to be bad for you. The one where he turns into Pickle Rick, that one is kind of all about getting out of situations that you don't want to be in, and it just, you slowly lose control, and then as you gain more control, it makes you it makes you a villain to do that, to avoid these things and push everything away and push everything down. It's really, really interesting. Like, I might talk about that as well. The video is a dichotomy of power, and I'll talk about Rick and Morty. I'll explain this more, because this is a really good idea too. I like the idea, loneliness and depression, of mostly depression, how it's handled, and this idea of dichotomy of power. I'm going to write this down. You guys, right here, I'm going to write this down right now. Depression in animation. The dichotomy of power. I'm going to talk about Rick and Morty and Naruto for sure in that. And we could make it Bleach as well. Why not? And the very last thing is one that I'm not going to be able to talk too much about. And it's this idea of, what is love? And I don't know. I want to know what love is. That's how I feel in my heart, in my soul. But I don't really get that one. So I have no answers for that at all. Hopefully I will. Hopefully I'll come back and be able to explain things like that. But for right now, I don't know, guys. But thank you so much for watching this as I go on this weird episode about, what? I talked about society, and I talked about how we as people, I talked about the human condition. How dare I? But I dare. Thank you so much. Leave a like if you thought anything I said was interesting, or the ideas that I went over were interesting, and you want to hear more of this kind of stuff. Leave comments about what you feel like I might have gone wrong. I have no problem with constructive criticism. Just don't be an asshat about it, because nobody likes that. And subscribe for more videos like this. I really am trying to dive into the impact that these shows have. Not just, why are they fun? Why are they enjoyable? I want to talk about what we can gain from different types of storytelling, and what we can gain not just from animation even as a medium, just what we can gain from film, cinematography, television, all this kind of stuff. Peace out, guys. See you on the next one.